Alright, this is Virginia Capes, 5th of September 1781. The British under Graves are facing the French blockading fleet under de Grasse from entering the Chesapeake. And this is an attempt to relieve Cornwallis by the British. De Grasse scrambles his ships to meet them. Okay. Well, the French have numbers. I think weight. They have first raters. The English don't have them. They have second rates. But that's more the nature of the fleets. The English have very few first-rate ships. Gunnery values. It looks like the French aren't doing too badly here. Not so many black circles, a decent number of white circles. The English, almost no black circles. What is that? The Princesa. That's a Spanish ship we've seen captured. You know, it's kind of funny because the Spanish were known for having good ships in this era. But they were undergunned and undermanned, but you'd think the English would have been able to do something about that. This ship's been in English hands for a while now. We've seen it in several scenarios. But the French outnumber. The wind is against the French, there's no question. You can see the wind there heading up this way. The French currently are beating the English. Looks like they're reaching with the main of their fleet, and they're coming in for an engagement. If the French wanted to turn to engage, well, they'd have to tack into the wind or else do a complicated wearing maneuver, which in this game is tough as hell. And I think actually that's appropriate. Wearing is too simple in fighting sail, and actually you could really hold that against the game. It's cute to play the game, but it's definitely one of the things that it doesn't represent well. It also doesn't represent command the way this one does. So, you know, for all my complaints about this, a lot of it's more along the lines of it goes into too much detail. It comes too close to a wooden ships and iron men type of game for the number of ships. Because this is a big scenario. Look at this sucker. Look at the number of ships I'm flying out there. And there's a lot of big scenarios. The next one's big too, right? It's going to be 16 turns. The French have the audacity of a bonus of 2 points. It sounds so far like it's all going for the French. But remember, the English still have the edge in some ways. We're in 1781. That means they have the carronading edge at this point. The French haven't deployed those in large numbers. What about leadership? We've got a 3 leader in command here. Graves is only a 2. The ranges of the leadership. This guy's pretty good too for range. I'd say it's close to a wash. The French have a little bit of an advantage, but they have more ships to keep under command. Something this big, you're going to want to try to keep in formation if you can, but as we've seen in other games, quite often it ends up in this ugly, ugly, messy ball. Who does the messy ball favor? Well, the French want to keep their distance, probably. They don't want to face those carronades if they can help it. But I think the messy ball kind of favors them in a sense, because it means, one, they'll have these larger command ranges, but also they won't be facing the wind advantage of the British as much, but the deployment to the messy ball is where that wind advantage comes into play. Once the British cut through the French line, though, then the messy ball is entirely in their favor, I think. Right now, with the wind against you, the French can't keep their formation, but if the British cut through that formation, the French can then turn and chase the English, and then it becomes much harder. It becomes this big turning maneuver through the wind. We'll see. There's some room here, and I could add more maps if need be. There's no reason this is limited to just 3 maps. That's what the scenario calls for, but I see, you know, we've got the scrolling possibility, which I can do by adding maps if need be. All right. You know, it's funny. I know so little about most of these naval battles. I know very little about a lot of battles, and about many campaigns, because I have this broad stretch of interest that I don't tend to have the focus in that some gamers have. And again, it reminds me of that question that Gilbert Collins asked me. You're more into the games than the history. And I don't think that's really the case. I think I'm not really that into the details of military history, for the most part. I'm into the broad concepts. I'm into how these fleets should operate and how they should work. And maybe I don't know everything about that, or much compared to the people who really studied the history of the era, but that's what I'm interested in looking at. I'm less interested in the specific scenarios, but somehow I want to only play historical scenarios because, I don't know, that grounds me a little better. You know, I don't want to play a Horatio Hornblower. For one thing, I don't know how much it's really representing real history, even in a projection, right? I'll play what ifs, though. In some cases, I did the one hypothetical, and I think it's about time that I should probably do a video, a discussion on why we game, not just me, but why we do the military simulations, why we play war games, because I think there's a lot of different people who do different things. And yeah, I'm using up valuable video resources that could be spent on this, another featureless naval battle, but a nice big one. And we finally have what looks like a big French advantage in some ways, but the English have that desire to close, which the French do not. And remember, they like to pound the shit out of the English ships a lot better, or the French ships a lot better than the French are able to do, because they also have the bonus, the wind, which is going to help their hull hits, and their, you know, just training advantage on firing at the hulls versus the French training advantage of firing at the rigging. Okay, well, I had a little gust of wind and a bunch of my French ships got knocked out of the way. Put the full sails on, threw myself, yeah, you know, the wind's going up, so I'll put more sail on. So I put a rock down, my marble countertop paperweight thing. That should be sufficient. It was just catching where the two maps combined. Lucky I didn't actually start before that. Anyway, you know, I don't know where I'm going to put my divisions yet. This is kind of always a hard decision early in the game because I haven't figured out what my strategy is. So I'm going to take a little time to think about that and then put the little command split markers down. Too often I just start moving and then say, hell, I don't know what. You know, I just moved up to the commander or whatever, or beyond him. This is, however, a scenario where I don't know if there's a hell of a lot one can do. The English, for the most part, I kind of like the idea of slicing forward with the wind. The French, not much they can do, but column ahead. This final rear column for the English is a little, has a little bit more interest. I can bring this into play as a second line after the main force that I've brought up. I could also start, how's this going? Start blowing with side slips some of the forward line to create actually a 3-division attack. I find that hitting with more firepower like that in a particular point is, and reasonably so, particularly helpful. I've got the full sails up, but you know, there aren't quite enough counters, so just assume they're covering everything. Kind of as you get closer, they're going to let their sails down. So I've put on the lead elements the full sails, and then they'll end up moving and filling out the rest of the thing, rather than putting a drift on and just having to add that other mechanical aspect. And then you can see I've got my chart for all my ships in place, and I feel like I'm just chattering to try to kill time and prevent myself from actually having to move any ships. Whatever good strategizing does for me is kind of questionable. Once I got to actually moving the pieces, yeah, the French kind of tried to follow that. They weren't the ones I was thinking about it for. I thought they were just going to go straight ahead, but I actually pulled these guys, did some backing sails so that I'm gaining ground with a second rank, and then sending this to the third rank, and then to sail down as well. Whereas the English just went ahead with their line, closing in on the French, and actually maybe getting so close that I don't want those full sails up yet anymore. Also, then the rear column moved into position to be coming straight on as well. That'll put us over to turn 2. End of two turns. The English, and yeah, I've been delaying a little. The English, I don't know what they're doing, but they moved slowly with this leading squadron and then pushed the next squadron, the second squadron, up pretty hard. And then the third squadron's turned and is also trying to catch into position. We're trying to just hit the French, cut through them, and then maybe turn up and swing down the line. In which case, maybe being in a single line, single column, when I get across here will be a good thing, because I'll be trading shots all down the line. As opposed to the French, who are trying to form up into that sort of triple line to make it more painful. We're beginning to gain some ground with these guys with full sail in the final rear guard there, to make it more painful when the penetration actually happens, so that the English have to go through multiple layers of it. 3, we're starting to see some of the opening salvos coming. All the French ships in that first column have fired on the rigging, mostly on ships with full sail up, by the way, of the English. Now that full sail gives the, I don't know where to put this next turn, but that full sail action gives, gives the French an additional +2 on the die rolls, and they were getting +2 firing into the wind. This guy actually fired at the hull of this ship, trying to get a rake. He didn't get it. The English, a couple of their ships fired at hull, but they're holding fire for a more devastating result by getting their carronades and their first shot and everything at the same time. So what we've got is a lot of first shots here. We can see that kind of on the board. I'll remove those fire markers before the next turn, of course. Otherwise, well, trying to get this into some sort of echelon type formation is just not working here. And the English are closing even with their final squadron here. Get that into play. The rest of them, though, are in pretty good position to just slice through the French and more or less slice through unanswered and do the turn that they want to do, and then maybe face the column, maybe from 2 sides, actually. It's quite possible that they could just rotate into position where this trailing squadron comes up and they just shoot up the rear of the French formation, forcing the French to wear around and try to find their way to the enemy ships, and where the fight is going to end up. All right. Okay, well, the English won the initiative, and instead of taking the first squadron up here, they instead turned this one in. You can see they kind of messed up their formation, but they lit up the rear end of that line. And now the reason for that is, if they can outweight, now they can't because the French can move this and then this. If they could outweight, if this column moved first, then they'd be able to hit the same damaged ships again. But the French aren't going to allow them that opportunity, I don't think. French central column sailed by, took some pot shots at a couple of these ships just to kind of wreck them up a little bit. Some against rigging, some against the hull. You can see, though, they're not doing a lot here. If you look at the actual hits, the London's probably the worst off, the only one with a penalty against it on firing from now on. We're hoping that when they cut through this next column, they're going to really get hurt, but I don't know. It looks pretty good for the English right now. Now they're going to move this squadron with the idea that, well, they want to hold off here, but the French are going to move that. Front squadron begins to kind of punch its way through. Some of them going a little more slowly, some of them doing some kind of turns to get some firepower in, but really kind of finishing off these guys and knocking the rest of them into crippled status. We only have one vulnerable ship. If that strikes, I still don't think that there's a chance that the French will flee at this point, but this is going very, very poorly for the French indeed. French start their wearing, kind of slipping their way into the English formation here to enable them to fire both broadsides, and actually that allowed some more English shots, but they didn't get a lot of hits there from either side, either the bow rakes that they inevitably produced, nor on the turns in the fire. Over here the remainder did not do that action, largely because this guy couldn't. He would have collided, and you're not allowed to intentionally collide. In fact, you must do everything possible not to. And this, by keeping these guys like they are, it keeps everything in formation. The English are going to have a little bit of trouble with their formation situation. I'll come back at the end of the round. I mean, we're done with all the movement, but we have the possibility of a color strike and stuff like that. Now, between French admirals' quality and the audacity value, that thing's got a couple of hits on it. It had no chance of striking. Anyway, we got a possible wind change turn, and other than that, we'll see how the battle continues to develop tomorrow. I like doing these games for my work days because I know the rules, and I also kind of know, gee, I can usually get a turn in here, a turn in there. But these big battles are probably an iffy choice just because I have to walk away after moving a formation. And then it's hard to remember what's moved, and this one's promising to turn into something kind of hellish, I think, with a formation already disintegrating there. Let us just check the weather. No change, and we got some out of control markers to put down, but you can also do a quick roll for who has initiative. The French have the better leaders, so they're going to have the initiative. They get to decide what they want moving first, and see, to me, it looks like they may want to actually slice these forward, because this little piece, although they're going to have trouble moving it, is kind of bogged. First of all, it's small and weak, but it's also, I'm not so sure what I want to do with it until I move this major piece. I think it's all going to swing around and try to sheath the English as they swing around, but I don't know. The rules I've learned, got a couple of out-of-command English ships, is move the rear part first when you're doing one of these multi-moves, because these guys, first of all, there's openings here. Sometimes that's not the case, but quite often the rear part of the line isn't going to block any firing opportunities for the front part of this kind of situation. And it doesn't matter whether or not they're separate commands. And also, your first fires, you're giving the opponent an option to return fire, defensive fire on you, but that defensive fire is on you. And you're at a greater distance. This is the best distance you're going to get a shot at with the French. And then you get to move your closer, better firing opportunity ships that also could take more defensive fire. So if the opponent, you can soften the opponent up before your close-in units can sail in. Just some interesting little, I don't know, gamey aspects of tactics within that. So the rear of the line held fire, figuring the Brits are going to come in closer. Up here, though, we engaged in some kind of distant fire. Again, the Brits are going to come closer, so that probably could have held off on this. Not a lot of effect here. We did finally damage one British ship. And this front part of it, well, we're in pretty bad shape. So they didn't get tremendously powerful firing opportunities either. This poor guy slipped his way into an out-of-control position. He would have collided. He had to do something because he would have collided. I think this was his only action he could do. His problem was he had some rigging damage, so he couldn't sail into and fully out of the opponent's hex, so he couldn't cross the T. There's something a little wrong about that, if you think about it. Namely, the length of movement requires that you get out of somebody's hex before your movement's complete. But that's an arbitrary, the turn-based aspect of movement is an arbitrary divide. So you should be able to be in the same hex. I can understand why the designer chose not to allow that, though. That would create a great complication in the whole thing. Just notice that lead squadron of French ships isn't really a squadron at all. It's all out of command. Both the admirals were in this one command here. The question I have, I couldn't do any better for the English either. If I added these ships to command, this one would be out of command. And so, I guess I'm leaving the division here. You don't have to divide up your command. You can let an admiral who's in another, be part of another command. So that was kind of the question. I'd kind of left this out here from last turn. I just slid it up. But for the French, I guess they consolidated their whole command because I thought this was one. Trying to figure out what to move next with the English. Almost seems like getting out of range of these out of command ships is probably my best move. And the English lead units have actually sliced through in places the double line. That anchor's just to remind me who's moved and who hasn't. They're still dealing out better damage. I mean, even through sailing through where they sailed through a double line, they're not for the most part. There's very little overlap there. But they, even in that little instance, they did better. But they've got a really high density of ships that cut through there. And now we're just kind of whipping around and coming up the other side and possibly getting in a position where we can fire broadsides on these guys and then on these guys if these guys continue to move forward. This just looks terrible for the French. I mean, they're getting hosed massively. And I don't know how they could do anything about it if they want to engage. I mean, if they had turned and run from the Brits, maybe this could change. But this is a fixed point battle in a lot of ways. It's not something where one side could just run away and hope for an advantage. Brits allowed the French out of command ships to all burn through their activations. This one's still out of command. The others succeeded in their roles. And some of them got some pretty decent shots off. You can see, what is this? The Intrepid is crippled now from some close-in fire that it took. Now the Brits are forced to take an action. No, actually they're not. Because those were just out of command. So I can still force the French to move their final squadron. Not sure if that makes sense. Oh, you know why it does? It makes sense because I moved this all as one squadron. I didn't successfully split the French squadron, so they're behind by one. So they're going to be forced to move those suckers too. And then they're pretty much out of everything, and the English get to go. The French out of commands were removed because they had the audacity of 2 points and a leader who's 3 points for the fleet command. So they've got a fairly good chance of losing those. The English are not in as good a condition. Their leader's been injured. Is this him? I don't know where he is. He's been wounded and he's down to a 1 point for their flag. And then they don't have the audacity, so they only have a 20% chance of being able to activate an out-of-command ship. But the French decision not to split their squadrons means that they are being forced to move when they probably shouldn't have had to. I put myself into kind of an interesting situation with this English ship. I think this is quite possible, and it may have happened before, but it's out of command, failed its role. Yet I can't figure out a way to prevent it from coming next to a French ship. Now, with the defensive fire rules, etc., I'm ruling that it can't fire, so that you can't kind of try to engineer this type of situation. Although that's kind of questionable too. I mean, if he is coming that close, why wouldn't he? It feels artificial, but he's on fire, so that's kind of unpleasant. But he only has 3 movement points. Now I could back sail for 1 and turn for 2, but then I have to move. I could turn here after backing sail. That would be all my movement. I think I can actually get away with this. Just one of those weird situations where if he had a little bit more movement, he wouldn't be able to do this. But 1 to back sail, 2, 3, and he's not going to be able to fire or anything. I can take this off. I would leave it there so that he couldn't use the defensive fire rules otherwise. But it's kind of a weird situation. But I did see a way around it. We'll see if the other ones have. The other one's next to a ship, so he's fine. And with the English slicing through the French line the way they are, they're just doing tremendous damage over here. Another 2 ships wrecked here. Now these guys held their fire with full sail up, and at that distance, they're just not going to do much, even if they were doing rigging shots at the English, who had their full sail up as well, though they backed sail to slow down, realizing we're getting too close to those guys. It's just kind of you really want to use your first shot and not do much. Yeah. It's less of a penalty in this game than in some, like fighting sail. But it still feels wrong to fire at that range when you know you're going to get sliced up very shortly, and that you want your first fire at that point. So that's the end of our movement for this turn. I've still got to clean some things up. We've got a couple of French ships, this new one here, that are just really about ready to break up. So there is a chance this could all end. All right, 3 French ships broke up and went under. Well, or belly up or whatever. And the wrecks are still kicking around there. Although the wrecks aren't dangerous in this the way they are in, say, Trireme or... I seem to remember something else that they were a pain in the ass in. Here they just kind of clutter the board. However, the French have no chance of breaking. If you look at the table, yeah, the opposing fleet has more undamaged ships, so that's a -1 on the table, but their audacity of 2 means there's absolutely no chance until things get much, much worse. A 2 audacity more or less says, yeah, I'm going to be here. Now, if I lost my main admiral, that would be a problem, but I lost instead this minor guy here. He went under in one of the ships, no chance to get him off the ship. It went from undamaged to sunk, well, from not on its damaged side to sunk this turn after it had moved. Not that there's terribly high chance of getting people moved anyway. But this looks like just a horrible bloodbath for the French. And, you know, it's beginning to really point out either there's deficiencies in the system, or more likely, I have no idea how to manage the French. But in this particular scenario, it's a tough, tough job. They're heading this way. There isn't much that I can do except let the English slice through me. I could turn and run. That's the only option. And that just didn't seem proper given the numerical advantage I should have. It's not like the English haven't taken damage. It's just their ships aren't in that terrible a shape. There were a whole bunch of ships on fire. Most of them put out their fires. We got a couple here. Some of them put them out by going underwater. But anyway, on to the next turn. add to the French's worries, this whole front section, because of these units cut here, that's all out of command now. I thought it was just going to be these two ships, and maybe one can make an argument that's a column, but I didn't feel like it was reasonable. But it's these guys too, because of the sinking here. Another one here kind of wasn't able to get himself in line. Whereas the English have 3 commands in play. There's an advantage to that in being able to force your opponent to delay, to wait on an opponent's action. And we'll roll a quick, looks like the English are going to get the initiative. I think they want to go first. At the very least, they'd like to slice through these ships with full sail up, so that those ships will not get a shot without the full sails in place, which is a penalty. Alternatively, though, there might be someplace else where they have a better advantage to moving first. Yeah, the English decide to go against those full sail burdened ships here, and they do quite a bit. You can see they damaged one just slicing through, some firepower coming through these guys in the tail too here. It just seemed like the better move, because whatever happens here, it's not really clear that the advantage goes to the guy who moves first in that situation. Both sides are going to kind of pass through each other. The only real question is, well, maybe the French can swerve through with an out-of-command ship here and get over here. Maybe they can get an aft rake. Or here, it's which ships they slice through and what the ordering is. And in some ways, actually, it looks like an advantage to delay moving those. Followed up by moving this out-of-command ship, which was close enough that it was allowed to fire. And that gives the English another opportunity to move a command. I think they're going to try to bring this command through, because it looks to me like, for one thing, I can get out of range of this out-of-command ship. I can do some other activities slicing through here that maybe put me in a better position overall than if I wait for the French to move first. But I'm not entirely sure, because I might be opening up, as I've done here, rakes across the bow from that. You know, it's not like there's a lot you can do in this game by fiddling with kind of the gaming mechanisms, but sometimes it's not absolutely clear that something's to your advantage. On this case, though, I think moving first is probably to the English advantage, just because I get to slice through some of these central ships and pound them up. They haven't taken much damage. On the other hand, I could keep pounding the ones on the tail end or whatever that have taken damage. I'm not sure which one's more important or more valuable. Maneuvering in the English center didn't work as well as I had hoped. So, one of the ships did kind of nicely, slicing through here, but and he's now part of this formation for next turn. But these guys ended up kind of in parallel, running along with this formation. They sliced through in a way that they took a lot of shots. You can see none of them are crippled, but they definitely were not happy with the fire they were receiving. I don't know if it did much actual damage. We had ships like the London there. You can see that's pretty beaten up. It had already had some damage. It's getting close to being crippled. It's a monster. And now for the French again, they're in that same position. Do they want to move one of their big formations, or is it more important for them to try to cut a shot here? This guy's actually not really out of command either, so he might be able to get an aft rake on this thing and kind of beat up that trailing portion of the English line. French indeed pulled the Bourgogne in for an aft rake. It actually took more damage coming in, though, for the attack than it dealt, I think. The Shrewsbury is pretty badly hit. It's close to damage now, too. But both had been damaged before. Now the English want to move this rear line, get it out of the way, largely so that something like this and this don't get to trigger off a move. I'm never sure. These out of command markers are kind of confusing. The anchors help me, but I feel like I have to leave them in place. Okay, and now these ships are getting trailed behind. I gotta be careful. That thing's not no speed demon, but these guys have like -3 on their movement, so they're kind of in danger. Anyway, the English have moved forward. Not a lot of action in here. A lot of firing, but some of the ships are so wrecked up that they're just not able to really pound the way they used to. Like these guys doing 1 hit each at range 1. Just unimpressive, basically. The French still have some pretty major pieces left to play. They have this and this, which are not, but they also have I think all their main formations, because the English have been jumping on their out of command ships. They let the French move in out of command if they want. I mean, the French can move whatever they like. They chose to move in out of command, and so there's a lot of French ships available to still move. For the English, I think all their formations have moved. Now it's just a scattering of these out of command guys that it doesn't look like many. It looks like they have 1 actually. So the French have a lot of moves left though. Okay, I think that's the rest of the French movement. A couple of ships here and there. I think everything's gone. A little bit of fire here, not much. Just a couple of ships firing with full sail up. But with those bow rakes, you know, this is the problem. The choice to not fire here, like at longer range, you're firing at less odds than you could conceivably fire at. But giving up a firing opportunity entirely for a turn is kind of painful. We saw that on the last turn. If you're not likely to do anything even with the bonus, it's not really worth it. And if we're talking about full sails up at range, we're talking about a 4. We're getting on to the 6 table here, which, because of the Audacity, might not do anything at all. Getting a bonus on the higher level tables is much more worthwhile. I don't know, but foregoing that 1 shot, the 1 pointers, whatever you could do, is kind of painful. So I don't know which way to go on this. I think overall my intuition's serving me pretty well, even if my tactical planning with the French isn't. We've got a few more ships on fire. Once I remove all these counters, I'll see more of that, but yeah, lots of, you know, the fire counters and then some out of control markers. And we'll see what the situation looks like at the end of the turn. Still no chance of anybody fleeing. The French obviously have lost ships. They lost another one actually, but they haven't lost enough to put them in range. In fact, if they even go down to -2 from double damage, they still, well, then they'd have a 10% chance, but there'd have to be twice as many fully capable English ships. It's going to be tough for the English to win this battle by forcing the French to flee, and I think that's what the Audacity kind of represents here, because the English are the ones actually making the attack. It's kind of weird the way they're aligned. I think it works okay some of the times, but some of the times it feels wrong. In this case, I don't think the English wanted to press their attack too greatly. So it's not bad to give the French the advantage from the Audacity, but I don't know. The English actually had a chance of losing the Europe. It could have sunk or struck. It didn't do either. It came within 1 point of striking. It's actually very likely to strike. It's basically rolling unmodified here. It's got no hits remaining. There's a -1 for commander quality. That's it. So I rolled like a 4. So this is just going to keep going. And it's kind of a shame because it looks pretty obvious that it's an English victory. It's not absolutely certain. The French still have some advantages with the Audacity. They have a bunch of ships that haven't even been engaged yet. So what happens when they start coming in and firing their first broadsides? And these guys are in perfectly good condition, sailing through some already damaged English ships. So I don't know. You know, my thought was kind of, well, It's a shame the French can't just break, because I think they're screwed. But I'm not really sure. They outnumbered the English so much at the beginning of this that weight is going to come into play. Okay, at the start of this turn, and I don't know where we are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th turn. The English largely resolved all their command control issues. I've got one little cluster right here, and the rest of these are all facing in the same direction and can actually trace through little gaps and whatnot. So they're all one formation. The French, this little trailing section is not. This is kind of tricky, but I'm calling this a column, because essentially this guy is turning on pretty much the same point that the rest of the column would be turning. And I think they've kind of formed up into something, even though some of the ships kind of drifted into it funny. The French got the initiative, and I think they are going to take it, and they're going to move across with this rear column to try to get some rakes there. Problem with that, of course, is the wind direction is heading right up this way, so any rake is actually going to be penalized, but it does slow down some of the fire the Brits can do. The Brits also have some serious issues with some of their rigging here. We got some, like these guys are only moving 2. This guy here, they've taken some pretty hefty hit. I'm maintaining some semblance of a formation, if I call this shit a column. And the French are just sort of threading their way right through here, firing. Everybody's just shooting the shit out of each other. But the Brits are taking the worst out of this, I think. So far. They haven't moved yet. But the honest truth is, the port side of these English ships isn't going to get much fire. And they're kind of double packed in a way that means that, well, they actually kind of are wasting half their firepower because it's facing their own ships right now. I'd like to get into an even line or column, but this cluster is kind of just how the formation fell into place afterwards. Now I'm on an English pick, and damned if I know what I'm doing. I gotta put a marker to remind me that this French moved, but I'm having trouble remembering what English ships have moved. It looks like this column moved, and I think that's all I've done so far. I don't know. It felt like I moved something here. Yeah, I've lost track again. It's one of the problems with this game. I can't keep track of what the hell I'm doing. I think I moved these guys, but I got no fucking clue anymore. I couldn't have, because this is part of their column, so that would have moved too. And it doesn't look like I have any individuals. I don't know where my... Oh, I moved this little tiny command up here, which is signified by that. And that's kind of counted in with this now, I guess. Which has not moved, right? I don't know. Fuck if I know. Yeah, I don't think I've moved these guys. Not trying to be cute. The Brits had this vulnerable ship. It's ready to sink. I slid up next to it, no problem. Didn't fire at it. It already fired that broadside. But I withheld fire because really there isn't a lot more I can do. It is ready to sink. I can knock down its mast, but actually my advantage is on hull. Or I can reduce its gunfire somewhat, but still, it's got the same chance of sinking no matter what. Well, it slipped in and did a turn, got a rake on me, and did like 4 hull hits on me. Gotta learn your lessons. The reason I didn't fire is I'm thinking, well, gee, I'd like to fire at some of these other ships further back in the line. Now, if I was playing a Go game, I'd be saying, wow, these are really ugly shapes here. This is not the kind of formation you want your Navy to be in. And this is just, these guys are back out of command, basically. This guy had to avoid a collision. He's not fast enough. And this is really the laggard end of the column. It's not able to catch up, and I was moving kind of fairly fast with the rest of these. Time for me to figure out If I have any French left, I think all I have is my out-of-command ships. Oh, what is up with this thing? Where the hell did that come from? Oh, that's part of this line. But it was... one ship had to be left out of command, and I think that's the one. Oh, no, I had declared that a column. I better move that. He should have moved before, actually. Final turn, action of the turn. These guys swing through and just slash up. You can see 3 ships turned into wrecks, and I mean nearly sunken wrecks in a couple of these cases. This guy is ready to make a check. Some of the other exchanges maybe not so bad, I'm not sure. But the English definitely did a number on that little squadron there. Over here, you know, it just looks like the French are, they might be at the 2 times number. I have to, once I do my count, we'll see. An English ship has struck. It's actually one that could go under. Nothing changed with any of the French ships. None struck, none went under. You know, something like this is real, it could strike. They have a 1 in 10 chance of striking, but it also only has a 1 in 10 chance of going under. Let's see. On a 0, the English flee. Nope. So we fade into another turn. Not a lot's changed here, but the fleets are getting mauled all to hell. Oh, I was kind of hoping it was over, even if it was an English loss at this point. I'm going to load this one up because I don't know how long this is going to take, and I don't want the videos to get ridiculous on this.